start with attendance. We'll go around the room, say who's here. Andrew, start with you.
Andrew Hennius, attorney for the committee.
Rob Mezzanotte, assistant superintendent.
Kenny Duba, superintendent.
Jennifer Lima, school committee member.
Rachel Santa, Director, Special Services.
Okay, so we have an agenda that we're definitely, well, actually, let me do this first. Nobody's here for citizens' comments. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was August 27th?
I'll make a motion to approve those minutes.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, just for clarification, the voting members here right now are Dr. Duba, Mr. Mezzanotte, and myself, but we do have a quorum, which is why we started. Pam, did you want to say anything? I just blew through citizens' comments.
No,
Okay.
that's okay, thanks.
So we have a ton of policies. I know we're not going to get to them, but we can't talk about them if they're not on, so I wanted to list everything possible. I figure the priorities are things that are going to affect the start of school. Ken, do you have any that you want to?
So I would do the attendance policy first.
Okay.
I don't know how I'm gonna get there, but I would do attendance. I do just wanna bring up and mention
Yeah, just like this-
energy management.
Okay.
When I get through it, but I do wanna make sure we do discuss some of that tonight. And then the anti-harassment, we probably wanna make sure we have in there.
That one can wait because that's just coming back to us to consolidate into one
Okay, just wanna
policy,
make sure
so
that's
that one's
not-
okay, yep. The other ones, I think, what we need to do HIV for a RIDE annual requirement. They know we're working on it, so if we don't get to that one today, that one's probably okay. But the others that affect school in the short term, I think, are the restraint one
Yes.
and the dress code one. The bus is, I think, also, just to make sure that we've got, so we'll start with, is the energy management one like a quick, this is what it is, this is what we're doing?
Why don't we do energy
Okay,
management,
yep.
that can be quick, and that way we have it.
Okay.
moving. So we have a requirement through RIDE, there's a checklist of items that we have to have in place for the stage 2 application. Part of that is showing a commitment from the school committee and school department on energy efficiency within the district, having a facility maintenance plan in place, the use of Energy Star equipment for energy efficiency, as well as a commitment is that we are not going to use any CFC, HCFC based refrigerants within our heating and AC. In addition to that, we have to make sure that we're following the New England CHIPS, which is the Northeast Collaborative for High Performance Schools criteria for any new school facilities that we might be building. We have to have these requirements as part of stage 2. So what I did was I put together a draft policy here for us to start reviewing. And in addition to that, we have a current policy that the Energy Management, Conservation, Sustainability policy that will merge these two policies together.
Is there like a document from RIDE that details
So
what we need to have?
there is a RIDE checklist that we have to follow that has all of these requirements in there.
Is it possible to put that in the folder with all the other resources?
Yes.
Okay. And so you're gonna go back and you're gonna review the policy that we don't have on the agenda, so we can't talk about, but our existing energy management policy and integrate the two together.
Right,
correct?
that's what I do. So I think the best thing moving forward is to take that energy management conservation policy, we'll revise it to include what I have in the document that I shared for tonight.
Okay, awesome. So you can
And
work
for
on
the
that and bring it
for the
back.
purposes of our stage 2 application, we just have to show that we are in progress
Okay,
of doing it. So having something shared tonight, along with the agenda item, and we'll have that part of our stage 2 submission, so they know we are working on these
moving
policies.
towards it. Okay,
So,
all right, awesome. Okay, see, one down. Hi, Erin.
Hey, how are you?
do you wanna do bus or attendance next?
Why don't we do the attendance next? I think that one might be closer to
Okay.
having it be done for approval.
So when we last looked at this, we just needed some, I don't know, there's still some stuff, okay. So you wanna just take this from the top, cause there's still a bunch of stuff. So this red line version has JE and then the JER integrated together. And so there was a purpose / philosophy in JER that I pulled into this policy, and that's that first 2 blocks that are in red underneath purpose.
That checklist is in the folder now, it's just pulling
Okay,
right there, so it's in
thank
there.
you.
You're welcome.
So it looks like something was added about chronic absenteeism, so that was one of the
I was,
notes.
I was
Yep.
shoot, I just lost it. I was working on that earlier, so there is additions
Okay.
to it.
We added the statute under philosophy showing what we're, this is just a stupid grammar thing, but students who were absent are subject to disciplinary procedures, or students who are absent?
I would say students who are absent,
Okay.
except we're talking about what will happen.
Jen, which one are you in right now?
Red
Oh,
line
never mind, I
JE
see it.
attendance, you
Thank
found it? Okay. So from here on was pulled in from the regulations, and I don't know whether we want to include these or not. It's basically like the definitions of what an excused and unexcused absence is, which I think we should.
Mm-hmm.
And so I pulled in the text from JER as it existed, and then I added the additional language that has since been created, under our policy ACB, because when this policy, was written, we didn't have those additional, protections as noted. Those are the ones, like an excused absence can be for the purposes of supportive measures or reasonable modifications as described in, policy ACG. So do we just wanna refer to the policy name, or do we want to?
So I put in here for us to refer to the policy. I think it's okay to have what is here in red, and then I would then put in parentheses the policy
Okay.
it's coming from. And you go to somewhere else too,
Okay,
that would be the
yep,
same.
I see that, yep. I see the 2, okay. Or the 3, yep,
Yeah, there's 3.
yep.
Yeah, I think it's good to refer to the policies, in most cases, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. Jen, can you just go back up to the philosophy quick?
Sure.
I don't mind adding the excellent attendance, the red part where it says excellent attendance and school success goes hand in hand, that comes from the reg, right?
Mhm.
But
No,
No,
that doesn't,
I
Ken
added
added
that.
that.
Ken added that. I do think that there are students in this district that miss school, even though they don't wanna miss school
Mhm.
because of chronic illnesses and different things like that, and I don't want them to feel, like, I wonder if there's some way that we can acknowledge that piece of it, like, it's not just that students are skipping school, there's some that, like, for their livelihoods and being able to get medical attention and things have to be out. So I don't know what that balance is, cause I know why we're saying what we're saying, but I also don't want it to unintentionally harm other students that really can't be in school. So just something to think about as we work through this one.
No, I think that's. So then coming down to the absence notification, I see, Ken, that you added,
So just to Erin's point, under policy statement, there is language there, and maybe it's moved or, it says to be in attendance at their school of assignment during all the hours of each established school day, except when absent for causes allowed by law, where the physical or mental condition of the child is such as to render attendance. Do we wanna add something there? Because that says
Yeah, maybe it's combining
allowed
them.
by law, but
Yeah.
what you're saying is there's sometimes barriers that get in the way of students coming to school.
Yeah, I'm just saying, no,
Yeah.
and I think in this case, these students would be covered under law, right? Like, it's not just like blatant truancy, it's, they would provide the documentation and it would be like, I'm going to get treatment for X or whatever.
Or may have
so
medical
I-
needs that keep them out for longer periods of
Yeah.
time and.
Do we usually have 3 things? Do we usually have a purpose and a philosophy and a policy statement?
Mhm.
Yeah.
oh, no,
No,
that,
right?
that should actually say policy, not policy
Yeah.
statement.
So maybe to Ken's point, moving that part up would help, or
Yeah.
and we could maybe edit it a little bit. Cause that kind of goes along with the philosophy, that first paragraph, I agree.
Okay. Okay. Under the absence notification, okay, so you got the thing in there about summer school, take that out. But it looked like, and I'm trying to remember what my. I don't think that sentence went for that. Oh, I think because here it's saying is the parent guardian responsibility to provide information regarding a family emergency or court appointment. Like those are the only reasons that are allowed for an excused absence is the way that reads, but there's other reasons under excused absence, see how we list all those other things. But it only lists 2 of those under the
Excused?
excused. So I think if we took out regarding a family emergency or court appointment and just put regarding the excused absence,
Where are you?
under absence notification procedure for elementary and middle, the second paragraph says it's the parent guardian responsibility to provide information
Okay.
regarding a family emergency or court appointment and to provide written documentation from a medical professional in the event of an excused absence. But that doesn't cover all these situations that we are saying could potentially be a
Be excused.
excused
Should
absence.
probably just provide written documentation, right? Not just from a medical professional, is that what you're saying?
No, I think Jen's saying like, if you were out absent for one of the other reasons, it's not addressing that.
Right.
So like, for example, if you're out for an observance of a religious holiday, what should you be providing as a parent or a guardian in that situation? Not that like it's, I think just telling you is enough,
It specifically
but,
only says
yeah.
family emergency or court appointment or a medical
Yeah.
professional, like it doesn't allow in that sentence, for some of
Yep.
those other things that we've noted as.
Could it be because if it's a school-sponsored activity, that's gonna be marked already in there as an excused absence, such if it's a field trip or they're going to somewhere, that would be marked in absence. I've seen that before with students. I'm just looking at you because I know at the high school it happens a lot with trips. Suspension's going to be marked already, knowing that out, and that's already captured in the absence. Religious holidays are not, but I'm not sure if we need to require reason for being out for a religious holiday.
Suspension days are recorded.
Yeah, so that's why I'm wondering if that's why when this policy was written, it didn't list all of them, because those would already be documented somewhere and not have to be placed.
Well, and we wanted to talk through.
Yeah, and cause I also wanna talk to, I have a note down later about the,
Medical.
medical professional, like an excuse from a doctor, like, if my child has a cold and I'm not sending them to school, I'm not taking them to the doctor.
Mhm.
And some people can't take them to the doctor, but that should still be an excused absence. So in those situations, there's not gonna be a written documentation from a medical professional.
I guess a question that I would have would be on like the truancy part of this, because that is something that could go to whatever. And so for me, like, there's like, my kid wakes up and they have a fever and a snotty nose, but like their sibling just had whatever, and I'm not, like, you know, you're not taking them
Right.
to the doctors, but you don't want to send them in, right? Because they're sick and you don't want their classmates, their teachers, or anyone to get sick. Like, if that then happened, what is it, 18 times?
Yeah.
Like then, and I've never gotten a doctor's note for these one-off 18s, like what would happen,
That's
trying to
exactly
see
what
about,
that's exactly what the court would look at, is the frequency. Because
Yeah.
that comes up quite often. My son woke up and was throwing up.
Yeah.
So I'm certainly not gonna take him to the doctor. I know it's the 24-hour flu or whatever it
Yeah.
is. And the courts are, they're pretty adamant about that. If that's, 3 or 4 of the absences, they'll count those as excused. But to your point, if you've got, if a school department comes in and says, well, yeah, but mom has called the student in, or dad or guardian has called the student in sick 76 times this year with no medical documentation,
Mhm.
that's a completely different story.
Yeah.
And there's no bright line, so to speak, but that's exactly what the court would look at, the frequency.
yeah,
How about instead of saying, provide written documentation from a medical professional, it's provide, I think we need, well, 2 things. I think we could tighten that up to just say provide information regarding, in the event of an excused absence, and just kind of like eliminate the specifics on one, and that way we're just saying the parent or the guardian needs to just give a heads up anytime the child's absence in their mind is deemed excused, right? But the other thing is, like, for us in terms of excused and unexcused, like, what we count as an excused and what we don't may not necessarily, because RIDE looks at it all the same, right?
Same.
But
Yeah.
truancy will look at if there's an explanation,
Truancy will look on a
right?
case by
Yeah.
case basis, yep.
yep. I think the goal is to write a parent/guardian, like, friendly policy
Mhm.
that also allows for, in those rare cases where it's like
Yeah.
going to truancy, like
Yeah.
something, right? Like, our goal is to get students to school, our goal is to want students at school, but also now that we've learned more about health and wellness, especially with the COVID pandemic and stuff, like, we want to also, like, not make students feel badly about staying home and taking a sick day or being sick, and getting better. So I think it's figuring out that balance, and also the balance of, like, not forcing folks to take their children to overrun doctor's offices when it's not necessary.
Yeah, I mean, maybe even if it's just as simple as like, not a warning's not the right word, but like a, hey, like, as far as we're concerned, if you're calling in your child sick, like, that's good, we take that as an excused absence. However, note that,
You have to use like a lawyer's term, like if that becomes excessive or
Right.
a pattern, you know what I mean, that we
you may
require
be,
medical
yeah,
documentation.
you may be
That's probably about the best you
Yeah.
would do. Of course,
Or
that calls
what
into
if it was
question
after
what's
so
excessive,
so
what's.
many days, or some policies state after 3 days, after 5 days, then a note is required, but if you're out for 1 day or 2 days.
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of the world is your oyster as far as that goes. Whatever you folks think is reasonable, just make sure that we're applying it. Because my experience, not just here, especially with the elementary kiddos, is it's almost, if you talk to just about any principal, they'll say, I'm not gonna ask for a note, even if it's, 7, 8, 9, 10, kids are sick all the time. Little kids test positive for COVID, they may not have to go to the doctor, maybe they're not really violently ill, they're home for 5 or 6 days.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised because that happens in truancy court all the time.
Yeah.
The principal comes in, I don't ask for
Mhm.
a note for that.
One thing I think we should be mindful of is just how this functions at the building level, because our teams are like looking at attendance regularly, and we're
Mhm.
looking to make sure we're messaging to the public regularly about the importance of being in school. So I think we should note the fact that, like, the excused versus unexcused definition, I understand where you're coming from in terms of like the messaging on it, but oftentimes with families, excused is kind of taken at its word, meaning it's excused, it's an allowed absence. And when it comes to looking at data at the building level and analyzing attendance trends and communicating with families and so on and so forth, having a tighter definition of excused can sometimes be helpful, okay, in terms of conveying the importance of being in school to families. And I understand it's different, like it's always unique situations, every case is always unique, and that's why the communication's important. But I'm just putting it out there as like, that's been, I think the expectation in terms of the communication coming from the buildings to parents.
Okay.
So what do you suggest, Rob, in the conversation that we're having? Because I hear you on that. So like, but I also, it's that, I'm trying to figure out that middle ground.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
I will tell you that it's just, again, this is just speaking from a little bit of my experience, it's tough because you kind of have to fall on one side or the other. There's not really a clear middle ground necessarily. It really, the importance, in my opinion, comes down to just the messaging that goes out and the kind of communication practices that go out.
I think what I'm hoping for with this, like with the edits to this policy though, is that we have some consistency there, because I think what some schools do is a little different than other schools, not in a bad way, but like maybe one principal says, oh no, like I know it says you gotta get a note, but like don't worry about it, like we know they're sick, the entire class has whatever. I think where I'm looking for is like some realistic language to match our procedures with our policies, because I don't think I've ever been asked for a note for my kids in the 4 or 5 years I've been in the district, but I'm also a rule follower, so like I don't want my kids to have unexcused absences if they're really sick. So like,
Yeah.
I think it's figuring out that piece of it, and I also don't want families having a financial burden of going to the doctors just to get a note because they want to do the right thing for their kid by
Yeah,
the schools.
absolutely.
Like that to me is just messy and not
And
what
to-
we're trying to achieve here.
And to Andrew's point, he looked at it from the truancy side, I'll look at it from just the
Yeah.
building side. The trends are what we look at.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's about that.
Yeah.
We're not gonna be scrutinizing families for a few absences here and there that are like quote unquote unexcused based on our rules. It's the trends that we look at. So if you have a trend, a consistent pattern of like of those types of absences, I think that's where you'll have more of a communication that comes into play. But again, how we shape that into policy language is kind of
I think we need to look
tricky.
at what you're saying, right? And we know that with truancy, if it's excused, they're gonna look at why it's an excused absence. But if we have children that are out sick from school and we see patterns and we want documentation of are they truly sick or are they just not coming, because that will also make a difference of how we intervene. I think we need to make that request. I also understand that some families might not be able to go to the doctor, but those are conversations that you have with the family, and you get to know that family and build that relationship of what's happening, and also learning more of
Right.
why the child might not be coming in and what we can do to support them.
What
But I
about-
think if a child is going to be out of school for more than 3 days and they're sick, something's going on. And
I'm with Andrew on that one though. Like if I swab my kid and I know they have COVID and they are not super symptomatic and are just
but
chilling.
I think that's different. I
How
mean,
though?
Because if you have COVID and you test them, you know they have COVID, that's one thing. But if someone is out for 3
Yeah.
days, it goes into a week, what's going on?
Yeah.
Are they sick? Are they not? And then if there's like what Rob's saying, if there's a pattern where now we're seeing this happen more often, what's really going on?
What about if we put some language in like, although a medical note is not required for an excused absence, please be aware that we may request documentation if there is frequent or reoccurring patterons, something
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
that.
and that's
Yep.
probably about the best you're
Yep.
gonna do, honestly, and
Yeah.
that gives the discretion to the building administrator.
Yeah, because you all
to
know
maybe
best,
say,
like,
hey,
if you're like, like if you're like, this doesn't seem right, like, I feel like we gotta follow up on this, we need to figure out what's going on with this student, and how we're gonna get them here and figure out how to support them, that allows it, but then it does it for like, the rule followers like me, on day 4, I'm not bringing my kid to the pediatrician because even though I know what's wrong with them and, XYZ, like, maybe something like that?
Yeah.
No, Ken's
Well,
nodding,
no,
but his
I-
face is saying no.
No,
No, I wanna work on something that's really like gonna make sense, cause
Right,
that,
and I would
hate
agree,
inconsistency.
we need to have language in there that allows us to ask for that when we're seeing that there are patterns and,
Okay, I'm gonna drop in what I just said, and then you can see if you.
a number of times where someone is out, where it gets to be excessive.
I just think like putting, I don't wanna, like in theory, it seems like it would make sense to say like after 3 days, But like to use that example, like that doesn't make sense, right? Like if a kid's never been out, their family member writes in and they're like, oh, like the whole class has COVID, they swab, they have COVID, they're out. Like I don't want, because the policy said after 3 days you have to do X for people that have to do X. Like if the principal says, yep, that makes sense, we know the entire class has gone down, hope they feel better, see you after they, whatever the policy, whatever the CDC is recommending at that point for when students can go back. Like I just don't want the policy to mandate something with a date time, because then when we stop following those because they don't make common sense, then the whole policy's void in my head. Like, you know, like once you stop following it in a procedural level, then it doesn't have much weight. I put the note in under definitions if you want to look at what I wrote. It's on like the edge though, if you scroll up.
Although a medical note isn't required.
Where are we here? I'm sorry.
I put it under, right there, go back to
She put it in a comment.
I put it in a comment on the side of like possible language.
The other thing, I don't know.
What page? I'm
On
sorry.
page
I
two?
didn't
You
make
go
that.
to-
Oh, there it is,
yeah,
okay,
just
I
go
was,
to the top,
sorry
scroll
about that.
down.
Should we in this policy somewhere also reference something about how RIDE, like an absence is an
That's what I was
absence
just
at
gonna say,
RIDE,
should we
and
divide
that,
excused and unexcused
yeah,
in
and it
various
does matter,
lands?
like
Yeah.
for the district,
Yeah.
like they use that as a
Yeah.
metrics for things, and so I do think putting that in and noting that is important, because as a parent, I would not know that off the top of my head, like you wouldn't, I would assume
I would
that
assume an
RIDE would,
excused absence would be an excused
yeah,
absence.
and would not negatively
Yeah.
be counted towards the
Right.
district, personally.
Yeah, that was a point I was gonna get to too, that
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
No, it matters.
yeah.
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 And that's why I think, you know, the communication piece is important, you know, cause sometimes excused can be received understandably as if it's something that's just like, oh, it's like, it's excused, it's okay. As far as the state's concerned, excused and unexcused, they don't even look at that.
Right, cause you're out of the building.
You're out of the building.
It doesn't matter why.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what
Yeah.
reason, you know what I mean?
Do we have anything in here when we're talking about excused or unexcused absences about, is it just physical health or does it reference mental health
It
anywhere in this policy?
does not mention, it does not specifically call out mental health. Oh, no, or the physical or mental condition of the child
Oh,
as
yeah.
such as to render attendance, yeah.
Perfect, I just wanted to make sure that was
Yeah.
somewhere in it somehow.
But that's where I think maybe saying something about, like, you know, we want you here, you should be here, we're gonna make every effort to assist you being here, but we also understand that sometimes you can't be here.
Mm-hmm. Rachel or Shivali, any thoughts? I know we're in the middle or elementary part, but
I just know that, just so you know, from the high school perspective, we always do attendance plans. So, you know, once hits 5 days, then we kind of like intervene, 10 days, then we call the family in. And we put together like an attendance plan to see how it improves. So before it gets to like even implementing the policy, we go through those steps.
Rachel
Well,
probably.
we usually have an IEP meeting for students in special ed if that is becoming a chronic issue.
So maybe we should reference somehow those two things, especially like I think something about for the IEP meeting piece of it, or could it technically be a 504 too maybe?
Depends.
Yeah.
For either one, we've developed plans with.
Yeah, so I think maybe putting something in there regarding that is important because that allows people to know that like they can work through
Mhm.
plans with the district on things like that. And then when we get to the high school part, or I'm not sure, I would imagine maybe the other building level, people might do that too, an attendance plan if the kids are, yeah.
I would keep that consistent throughout the
Yeah.
district.
Yep.
Yeah, so we should probably add some language there regarding, like, something about if, you know, if there's a pattern or if there's frequency,
Yeah, yeah.
that an attendance plan would be put in place. Or be worked on. Going back to the part where it was talking about the communication, Does every school do text, call, and email?
What page
No,
are you on?
that's new,
Sorry.
because we
Okay.
talked about that from the summertime, so because of what we talked about from the summer, I added that in there.
Okay, so
Because we
that's
said
gonna be
that
a
was- that
new,
was
a going forward
changed.
thing, all three mechanisms, okay. I look forward to the multiple correspondences.
Great.
No, it's fine, it's good, that makes sense.
And excuses will not be accepted later than 2 school days, is that the rule after the absence?
That's what we had in there, so I'd make sure it was in for, we had for high school, so I put it in there for elementary and middle as well. I think we need to have some timeline on it, if it's an excused absence, that we receive something. So, it already was in there for procedures.
If you go to the dentist and you forgot to grab the note, you're not getting back in 2 days
Right, I was wondering that
for that note. And I've gotten them weeks after because I knew it was excused and I just forgot to get the note. We have records if you've been to the doctors or the dentist or something.
Can we give a little language to like,
Well, are we requiring notes?
we're requiring notes, but I'm saying for the 2 days thing, can we put in something that, like, to allow for and may exercise discretion, you know what I mean? I could see
Yeah,
there being.
unless approved by the building administrator.
Yeah, I
or
think so,
something.
just because I could see situations
Yeah.
coming up there that are legit.
Or you get the note if you're creeping on 18. You don't
Right.
get the note necessarily, oh, I don't need that note because he's not gonna be out that long. But then I can go back and get a note from excused, cause I know it was excused.
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll have to fix all those
I would
paragraphs.
put like excused absent documentation. Right?
Yep.
I know you were just typing quick, but.
So where did we land around the family emergency court appointment medical professional? Are we just gonna say regarding an excused absence?
Where are you?
Or
Way up at the top.
under absence notification procedure, instead of saying it's the parent guardian responsibility to provide information about A, B, C, and D, are we just gonna say it's the parent guardian's responsibility to provide information regarding the excused absence, and then insert the text you said there?
Yeah. I think that's where we're at right now. I don't know if that's where we'll
Okay.
end, but.
Okay,
Can
and
we
we
go-
would do, go ahead.
No, finish your.
I was just saying we would do that for each absence, tardy, early dismissal,
Mhm.
right?
Can we go back to the excused absence documentation not be accepted later than 2 school days after the absence unless approved by the building administrator? I'm just gonna put it out there, if we're going to allow that, then I would just take it out. Don't have a timeline on it, because otherwise now that's putting it up against each building administrator. If we're saying it's okay to submit something afterwards because you might forget it and it takes a while to receive it from
It
the
does ma-
office, do we want that in there?
Doesn't it matter though for like the high school, I remember the conversation about like the high school students and them retaking things and different things like that,
So
like
what
I
would
don't
the
think you wanna
timeline?
have it be forever, because like to the citizen's point, like that does make sense, like if you needed to backdate, in a certain situation, but like if we're talking about like making up stuff for quarter grades
So
and
what
stuff.
what would be a reasonable timeline?
For the number of absences.
No, to
No,
get an
if-
excuse
to get an
documentation.
Bring my child to the doctor, forget to get a doctor's note, what's a reasonable amount of time for me to get that note and bring it to the high school so it fits in within that quarter of marking?
So they can
Normally
retake
take 3
the,
days.
so we can retake the test, right? So like,
We have to make it aligned with that
Change
other
from
one.
an excused absence to an excused absence. It's normally within 3 days we
It's
require.
within 3 days, okay, so the policy said 2.
Otherwise,
but
they'll
if we
go to the
change
end of
that
the
to
year, give
3.
you excuses for
Yeah.
every date for the whole
Right.
year.
Which we also get sometimes.
Right, so then the 2 should be a 3 within that statement.
again though, I'm confused, sorry. Are we so your kid's out sick one day, or they go to their annual
we're not talking about
doctor's?
sick, we're talking they go to an appointment.
Yeah,
and
okay.
come back. With
Yeah.
that. Because every time you leave the doctor, do you want to know if you're
Never
school.
once have I ended, like, given those in. Like, they don't
I
ask for
understand.
them.
They
Yeah.
don't ask, but you need to submit them.
Do they,
Yeah.
do they get
I
marked
don't think that
as-
they get marked as unexcused though.
They
I
do
think
at
we
the high
say,
school, they do.
yeah,
Yeah, I always, when I leave the doctors or the, then I take it and then I give it to the kids to bring in. But if
I'm
you're
just saying
saying
though,
at
like,
the high
if-
school it's 3 days, then that, our policy should reflect that, then make sure it says 3, not 2.
well, for sure, yeah. So I think,
Could I just maybe alleviate or maybe complicate? If we go with the change in the definition that you discussed, where it's not necessarily from a medical provider, it would seem that the 2 or 3 days would be fine, because what you could do in the dentist situation is parent can send or a guardian can
Yeah,
send in a note that
someone
says,
had
hey,
a
you know,
dentist
Andrew went to the
appointment.
orthodontist yesterday, I
Yep.
forgot to get the note, please excuse it, I'll submit it at a later time, you know, something that it's, I think the way we were talking about it would still constitute an excused absence, coming from the home,
yeah.
Yeah.
just a thought.
But then how would we keep track of, you know what I mean? That's why we don't do that. And again, we can change it, but I'm just telling you what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Someone calls, we still log it as an unexcused absence until they bring the note to us, which is our expectations generally within the 3 days, and normally families are very respectful of it. They bring it in, we change the unexcused to excused. What we changed in the makeup was that unexcused child can still make up the work. That was what was missing. So that we can move forward with the
Mhm.
education part of it. They would still get 48 hours to make up the work. And then sometimes they bring it in a month later, and that's when we change from an excuse to excuse.
Not
If we just
unexcused
kind
to
of, if we
excused.
just did, just blanket it like, alright, you gave us a call, so we'll track it as excuse.
Yeah, I meant it would
That-
have to come in a form of a note, but it would come in from the parent or guardian or whoever it was, so you would have a documentation, which I think is what we were talking about potentially requiring.
That still would, I'm just thinking
Yeah.
logistically, it would be hard for us to track, you know, parents sending in a note, but then, I don't know.
So
They
like
never
if
get
I
followed
call
up. Yep.
and I say Malcolm's not coming in today,
Mhm.
not that this ever happened.
Yeah.
No, it did. And then he's out for 2 days, and then like on the 5th day, I go, oh crap, I never wrote him a note, right? And so I just write, please excuse Malcolm for being absent, and I send that in. What happened? Like,
That's still marked as an unexcused absence with a note indicating the parent called.
okay, but even after I send in a note, it's still, see, that's
Because
where
it's-
I think we have a disconnect.
Because it's your note versus a
Yeah.
medical note by definition. What we did recognize is that was preventing some students from being able to make up work, so we fixed the make up work portion, if that makes sense.
And how do they know that if it's cause it says parents call?
It says in the note,
Okay.
yeah, so teachers can see that.
But that doesn't go to we understand that you're not gonna go to the doctor thing.
In terms
some
of
cases,
records,
yes.
it still will say an excused absence, parent note received,
Yes.
so the child can make up the work. But we right now don't have a mechanism to change that to an excused absence.
So what I'm hearing is that based on the way the current policy is written and being implemented, the parent does not have the ability to execute an excused absence. It has to come from a
Correct.
medical professional, right?
Yes.
Okay, I think that has to change.
Well, that's what
Yeah.
that's what we're talking
Yeah.
about a little bit.
With the caveat that, repeat patterns or after absences that exceed a certain number of days or whatever.
The thing that we're gonna have to do with that, just as a change, is that when it comes to analyzing the trends and
Mhm.
looking at attendance data, we're gonna have to look at if they're coded as excused, because I think before, the code as excused is always looked at as being tied to documentation that was
Mhm.
third-party documentation. If that now is gonna include family documentation, we're gonna have some kind of distinction there a little bit.
Correct.
To make decisions on steps to take to intervene with kids who are missing school.
Sure, so Mr. Hennius is now giving 47 written
Right.
excusals, that would set a trigger.
Right.
But
So
if you're
that's-
just looking excused versus unexcused, then it wouldn't necessarily.
Right.
Right.
And that could also impact things from year to year. If we've been operating under one process now for, I don't know how many years it's been, but that's going to change, that's gonna, if you're looking at year-to-year trends with it, then that's gonna have to be considered.
It doesn't matter though for RIDE. So that trend will be just fine. You know what I mean?
Well-
No, but like for the data that we're, like it does matter internally, but externally it'll be apples to apples.
Yeah, I mean, it will. Again, I think the messaging out is gonna be important.
Yep.
The messaging is gonna be important, because at the end of the day, RIDE considers a missed day of school, they're all equal. We code them as excused versus unexcused, which I think is appropriate. However, if the definition of excused is changing, we have to make sure that families understand what that change is and why we're making it. You know?
So I'm trying to go through this in my mind here. So, okay, so I have a student and they have been absent 7 times and I only took them to the doctor once, right? So that's 1 excused absence and 6 unexcused absences. So in your notes, you would say, oh, Jen's writing them out again, right? Like that's what you would see. RIDE would just see absent, right?
Yes.
What gets communicated to the truancy person?
Well, your truancy person would receive nothing about 7.
Well, okay, make it 18, like, you know, or whatever the number is to get to the threat.
If
or
the
when
number
we
is,
start
if
to-
the number is, yeah, like high to the point of chronically absent,
Yep.
should probably feel free
So,
to
yeah,
jump in
so
on this,
Didn't
yeah.
she say when she came that she follows up on both?
I
Like
thought
she didn't
so,
care.
yeah, that's
like
what-
if
yeah.
it was a lot, she didn't care if I remember correctly. I could be completely
No, that,
wrong.
I got
Shut
the
Valley,
vibe
sorry,
that they
Lauren.
factored in excused, right, in your conversations?
Right, but it's not blanketed 8 unexcused absence, it would be followed up by a attendance plan.
Yeah, she would
what's
look at
going
context.
on,
Yes,
right?
yeah, he wouldn't have made it to 18 without some heads up, right?
Right,
Yeah.
and
doesn't-
then,
yeah,
and then, so because we maintain like a attendance tracker, the student services offices goes through it, the counselors put notes, we have a plan. Then if we think at that point that this is a real truancy issue, it's not purely based on number, then it goes to truancy. So it's a high bar before it goes to truancy.
Truancy is it's vetted through a number of steps before it reaches that point.
Okay.
You know, so it's vetted through a number of informal steps at the building level where there's teams that meet, they reach out, letters, calls, so on and so forth, before it would reach a truancy level.
And this is a like big question, but so other than makeup work, which I think they let unexcused absence makeup work anyways, why do we care about the difference? And I'm genuinely asking.
Say that again? Why do we care about the difference between
Unexcused
unexcused and
versus
excused?
excused. And
Legally, that would be a truancy. I mean, because even though I know that the truant officer Sharon
Yeah.
was talking about, if you couldn't go into court with 20 medically excused absences and file a or you could, you'd get thrown out that very day.
What do you
The
mean?
court, if you
Say
say,
again?
you were to go into court and say, we've got a student who's had 20 absences,
Yeah.
now they're excessive, all of them have been medically excused.
yeah.
Right,
The court was, they.
yeah, you're not gonna receive
No, no,
those,
yeah.
yeah, nor would a school
Would
ever
not
bring
take
that.
it.
Right,
hope.
no, I'm
Yeah.
not suggesting
Yeah.
they would, but I think
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
answer to the question, which is, why do we care?
It's-
Because at some point, those unexcused absences, if you're going to go down the truancy road,
Yeah.
that's what the court's gonna look at.
But if it gets to that point, wouldn't the families then have to provide documentation?
They would, but why would we wanna wait till then and like, otherwise that's making more work for everyone else versus saying, put the excused up front. And that way we know, cause if we're not asking for to me, that just doesn't make sense, because why say
what I
it
heard
doesn't
was-
matter and then.
I'm not saying it
if
doesn't
we have
matter, I'm saying
well, you did,
excuse is
yeah,
excused.
You said, why does it not matter? And so if a child's out and they're just being put in as unexcused, and then all of a sudden now we're going and saying, wow, this child's got 20 days of unexcused absences, we now need to contact the family. Why put the family through that situation of now saying we're putting you through truancy, when the family's gonna come back and say, well, there's a medical need and the doctor's doing all this, versus we want that up front so we know we're not doing that, so then we're also not notifying the family of the truancy. So that's why we'd wanna know up front that's an excused absence and log it for our own records.
So we're,
Because depending on the.
But doesn't
what those
excused or not excused, didn't I hear it doesn't matter for truancy purposes, so then, like,
We're
even
not-
if
No,
you
it does
had
matter for
20
truancy.
excused,
It does matter for
Should
It
truancy.
still
certainly
look at
matters
it.
for court
Yeah.
purposes.
Yeah.
It matters for truancy.
yeah,
So the idea is this, and correct me if I'm wrong here, what I'm hearing you ask is that, why do we distinguish between the two?
yeah,
Is that correct?
yes.
So let's say we weren't gonna distinguish between the two, which one would we call it? Would we call it all, would they all be unexcused, or would they all be excused?
Well, I think there's a difference, and I'm not advocating for anything, I'm truly trying to understand, because I think we're talking about something and I'm like, is it really, I'm just trying to understand like the level of severity in it, not advocating a side or not side.
Mhm.
But what I'm thinking about is like, okay, our goal is to have students in school, and then like, we're trying to like determine, is it real, is it not real? Like, and then, but like, I don't know, let me think how to explain this.
I don't think it's about real or not real.
Yeah.
I think it's about having data at our disposal and having communication with families at our disposal so that we
Mhm.
can understand and look at trends as far as kids' patterns of not being in school or being in school. I think I know that's the work that we are trying at the
Yeah.
building level to do, which is to look at the information that we can collect, the data that we can collect. And we can certainly, this happens all the time, which is you can have arguments and discussions about how we define each one. But to to have some distinction between an excused absence and an unexcused absence is a very valuable tool for a school to make sure that they have good communication with families.
I guess like me calling and saying, hey, William has an orthodontist appointment, he's not gonna be in this morning. What's the worst, like, and that gets marked as an excuse because you know that he was at the orthodontist, like, internally, do we need the documentation until we get to that truancy point?
So
I
you've got
think so,
maybe 5
yes. Like,
excused
yeah.
and 5 unexcused, what would the difference be? Is that?
Yeah, like that's kind of what I'm thinking about, like, because I totally hear you on patterns, I totally hear you on like being able to communicate with folks. I know when we get to the really extreme, it's X, Y, and Z, but like, do we need to bring a kid to the doctor and pay a copay and have the pediatrician, like, whatever, if like, or can an excused absence be on the word of the parent? In
Well, I
the
think
school
we were
house?
just discussing
Yeah.
that, right? That's a language change I
Yeah.
think we were proposing.
But
Which
then
is-
it's like
which
getting
is-
complicated with like, well then, why can't you just take their word on the orthodontist appointment? Why can't you just take their word on the whatever? Like that's what I'm trying to.
Because then we
Work
wouldn't
through.
be able to even see the trend, I think. Like if there is a trend that's existing
Yeah.
with a student or a family that is habitually being out, we wouldn't see that if it's all blended in into excused.
But Erin, correct me if I'm wrong here, okay, because the language we just proposed is changing, okay? It was under, definition of excuse, correct? So,
It was there, but then we were talking about it.
so your proposed language change is, although a medical note isn't required for an excused absence, please be aware that we may request documentation if there are frequent or occurring patterns, right?
Yeah,
That's kind of what you're suggesting?
that was a quick version of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but
To
in
give us something to
general.
work with. Yeah.
Okay. So.
But then as we were continuing the conversation, we were going like the opposite direction, which is why I was trying to get like to the root of what we were trying to solve.
Well, I think that is speaking that a child's out sick. What we're talking about is a child has an actual doctor's appointment. Those are two different things, right? So if a
Yeah.
child's out sick, we're not gonna require the family to bring the child to a doctor to prove they're sick and bring in a doctor's note unless we are seeing
I figured pattern.
patterns
Okay,
and
so then what
trends.
if we?
If a child has an appointment and they're going to the doctor, what we're saying is to bring note in, child went to the doctor.
But what I'm hearing is that if I am a parent and I keep my kid home sick for 3 days and I call, that's an unexcused absence without a note.
In the current practice.
In the
and
current,
how
yeah, that's
it
what I'm
should
trying
be.
to like
Yeah.
talk through, like,
Yes.
yeah.
Yep.
And so I guess the question is like, and I understand like where you're coming from, you wanna identify the issues and you wanna get with like the kids, how many, just like roughly, chronically absent students, are they often being called in or are they just not getting calls?
So we do our attendance tracking bi-weekly. We have an attendance small little committee that meets and then they narrow down, they look at all the data and then they narrow down. And I don't know top of my head how many per meeting, how many they identify for attendance attendance plans, but that usually knocks down the number of kids that end up.
The ones who have a parent call, okay.
But again, I think to go back to what we're talking about, we're talking about potentially just expanding the definition of excused absence,
Yeah.
correct? That's kind of what we're talking about?
Yeah.
My point on that is, it will just, and I'm not saying this as a, you know, to me, again, we can have different perspectives. It will just require, on the school side of things, additional communication, additional clarification for families about this, and it would also require us to like make sure that we, our attendance teams at the building level are tracking it properly, right?
So how can, cause here, the two things that I'd like to see out of this, aside from a few other little things, are like making sure that students can make up their work, which it sounds like they can, and maybe we just have to like articulate that in the policy,
Well, that was
right?
something I
It's
think
in-
we had learned.
It's in the grading.
It's all-
That was
It's
in- that was
great
changed in the grading.
procedure,
Right.
Yeah.
it's connected to this one, but practice and
It's-
procedure
Are two different
and
things,
policy
so-
were not aligned
right.
there.
So we
Yeah.
have to do that, and then the other thing is we want to make sure that we're making a point about the importance of attendance, how absenteeism is a
Mhm.
problem, but also recognizing that there are instances where, you know, it's not practical to go to the doctor, it's not feasible, or, you know, other, so try to strike that balance. So what would have to change with this in order not to create like a administrative nightmare, but still have that? Because I don't, as a parent, like, I don't wanna look at this and be like, oh, I gotta take my kid to the doctor, or they're not gonna be able to make up the test, or, oh, I gotta take my kid to the doctor, or I'm gonna end up in truancy court.
The make up the test thing and the go to truancy court thing, those are not, I mean, those, you're not gonna not be able to make up a test, that's clearly defined, I think, now in the new grading policy language, and.
I don't think it's fixed yet, but.
Yeah, it has one more read, it will.
One more
yeah,
read, but
yeah.
yes,
We've already been practicing it though.
right.
Which we so love.
I know. You
The
wanna come in
truancy,
there. I get it.
the truancy piece, again, there are a number of steps that are procedural at the building level before it reaches that point. I think what we're talking about here is just the coding
Yeah.
of the absence.
I'm just
Um,
thinking like, okay, I go to the orthodontist, which is a journey on its own as a
Mhm.
parent. We do the whole thing, like whatever, we leave, we forget the note. Why, as a parent whose kid will not be absent 18 times this year, do I then have to go through all the effort to get the note? You know, like, and it's not just, you know, like,
So I'm
like
gonna
why do
play-
I care?
I'm
Why
gonna
does it?
play
Why do
devil's
I care?
advocate.
No, like
So-
why do I care as a parent? Like how would I justify to a parent why it's important to have it marked unexcused or excused at the elementary level? Like you know, like other than get your kid to school, like why? And I'm not asking for me. I will get the note.
In an
I'm a rule follower,
individual-
but
In an individual setting, what you're describing, in an individual instance, it's not important.
yeah,
In a broader context where we are looking at trends, where we're looking at data playing out over time
Yeah.
and absence patterns playing out over time, it may be a factor. Again, but not like that individual instance, but it may
Yeah.
be within the context of, okay, this student was also
more-
absent for multiple days here and multiple days here and multiple days here, and we really haven't seen any documentation. That's where a conversation might happen. That's where communication
And
with.
it's more of a factor for us, for the parents to know that we are looking to make sure, to analyze why students are not in school, why, you know, if they're out and we
Do we
notice
do that now?
patterns, why are they, yes, we have, we have
Yeah.
team, you know, we have our school teams that look at if there's students that have reasons, you know, not reason, but
Yeah.
have a number of absences, we do look at that at every school level, we look at kids that are out for lots of time
Mhm.
and.
Oh yeah, I mean I know we're looking
and
at
so-
the big one. I meant like
right.
at that granular level.
At the school
Yeah.
level, yes, all that is looked at school level, because that's how we make the progress at the big level of our attendance, because each school's looking at that, and has teams and looking to see that, and then working with the social workers or other people in school to make contact to the families when we notice these patterns. If parents and families, prior to that happening, submit the note and we tell them the importance of the excused, then if a child's out 7 times and out of the 7, 4 are excused absences and 3 are not, most likely that's not a child that's gonna come at the top that we're gonna say, we're gonna really look at. I
Yeah.
mean, does it end up, depending on where those 7 days are throughout the year, impact the 10% rule? Yes. But if we know there's some excused absences of doctor's notes and there's reasons, then that's gonna help us know what students we need and families we need to pay a little more attention to supporting.
That may need to be like worked into the purpose of the philosophy.
Yeah.
Like, so that is clearly articulated to like Erin's point, like, so why am I going to have to
I'm not
schlep
going
back
to be
right,
honest.
right, or like, and so the importance of understanding why we're tracking this, what we're doing with it, why it matters, that having that information in the policy might make people who are like, oh, let me look at the attendance policy, oh, okay, I guess I should get the note because it makes a difference, you know, versus, whatever, I don't need it because they're not gonna be out 18 times, like that might matter.
Mhm.
Can I add one thing? Like, you don't want people to abuse it either. I mean, what if a kid starts having an appointment every Friday afternoon, once a month, because they're going on, either they're leaving town for the weekend? And if you don't have that caveat of having a note, I do think some people may abuse that. I mean, maybe it doesn't matter, but that's gonna rack up. What if they're a skiing family, they wanna get on the road with it? I'm just
Doesn't
saying.
matter.
We have that issue without
That's the
those.
part that I'm starting.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like, we'd mark it, you'd call, they'd be like, yeah, it's
But
like,
I can
yeah.
call and say I have a doctor's appointment, cause now I don't know I need now there's nothing that says I need a note.
Yeah.
And so you might do that more frequently even if you don't have a doctor's appointment.
But
That's
even if
what
you don't
I'm
have
thinking.
anything, you could just call and be like, my kid has a migraine, they're not coming in today, and it's marked unexcused, and that's it. Like, you know, like,
Well, that's where I
Yeah.
sort of disagree, that's why I think that's argument to have a note. Cause like, I don't take my kids every time, but if my kid is sick the 7th, 8th time, that's when I might go to the pediatrician, get the note, and trust me, I never take my kids to the pediatrician unless I really have to. So I mean, like, there's that side of it, from my opinion.
That's why I think articulating it in the, like.
yeah, to Rob's
policy.
point, the communication part about
Yeah.
it, because I don't
Yeah.
I think we could do a better job communicating just in general, the policy about it, cause I don't think, other than
I thought
maybe
all
a
those notes I
communication.
wrote were excused. I had no idea they weren't. So like I think that there is some confusion, I think, about maybe it's just me,
There
but
might be some confusion, but I also think it's like worth noting that like, I'm really proud of our attendance work that we did last year. I mean, our data backs it up, like we made great strides in
Mhm.
every building, in terms of chronic absenteeism numbers, so I think we are doing a pretty good job of it.
Oh yeah, and this is more, I think, just trying to, like I said, align practices with the policy and also like make student, like that piece of like that kind of philosophical change of like, it's harder to get into the doctors. Like that wasn't a thing 5 years ago. Like you could call your pediatrician and get in super easy. Right now it is a huge problem with the doctor shortage, nurses shortage, all of those sort of things. So not trying to exasperate that issue unnecessarily and like make sure that we're doing the right thing for students and learning. Like I think that's where it's aligning, not that we're not making strides or attendance or anything like that.
I agree with that, but I also don't know that we necessarily have this exasperation over doing that. I haven't seen any evidence of that personally.
Well, because I don't think they're implementing it. That's what I'm curious. That's where I know the high school
Well, you're
says they
assuming
are.
that. I think that
I mean, I'm
we-
looking at my own personal experience on what is marked, and it's not. So that's where I want to make sure we're aligned. Like if that the schools and the buildings are doing what we're saying we want them to do for your data purposes. Because I love the good data, but.
No, I know.
So what else do we need to do on this one, Jen, as far as?
so the other there's a couple other things other than these hashing this out. The early dismissal procedure, we talked about this before, but if you're over 18, you can sign yourself out, but that's not what it says in the handbook. So there's a disconnect there.
The handbook has to change. Didn't we legally
It does,
determine
and
that?
legally they are allowed to, right, Andrew?
Yep.
Yeah. So Ken, I know that was like paining you because that's not what you wanna see happen, but, like.
You notice I put my head down, I said, yep.
I know. Legally, I mean, they're over 18, so they do not need a
Where
note
are
from
we?
mom and dad anymore.
We're under,
Excused early dismissal.
It's right in the policy, I think. It's the handbook that's not in
The
alignment.
handbook is not in alignment.
I do think, though, that
we'll
we
change
can-
the handbook.
Well, and I think we can say,
Next year.
I think you can reinforce that message of like, yo, stay in school,
Stay in
please.
school,
Like, I don't think
yeah.
you just have to be like, you're 18, like, you can sign yourself out. But I do think you don't want to have it inconsistent with what legally
You
is
can
Right,
do
but
written.
I think the caveat to that
Yeah.
is, as you're pointing out, there can be consequences for that.
Yeah.
It's just like
You
anything
still have
else.
to go
If
to
you know, as an
school,
18-year-old,
right?
you can't say, I've decided I'm gonna go to school from 7 to 11 and then
Mhm.
I'm leaving. Well, you may be able to do that, but ultimately that may result in failing classes.
Right, well, you
other-
can, but there will be
Yeah,
consequences,
exactly,
yes,
exactly.
yeah.
Because what's the age in Rhode Island that you have to go to school until?
18.
You do. It is 18.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Used to be 16.
So beyond that, it's. Yeah. So,
I
I
believe
think,
Massachusetts might be 16. I'm not sure about that.
it
but
used to be
Mass-
16 in Rhode Island, but,
Yeah, it was.
yeah,
They
Well,
made
for
it-
truancy purposes, it was.
yeah,
Okay.
they had 18, right?
So that takes care of that. I personally don't like the word aggrieved under the appeals process. I feel like that's,
It's a legal word. Where at page are you on?
I don't have page
Yeah,
numbers.
there are page
There
numbers.
aren't in what I'm looking at.
Okay, we've determined that that is a person problem. Give me a bullet header then.
Put your
Appeals
cursor on the
process.
side.
I just looked in that folder.
Huh?
Oh, page 7, I found them, they're over here.
There you go, good job,
I
Ken.
thought they were in the
Look at folder,
document.
stuff falls in theories.
Well, it is on mine. Might be the settings on the computer.
It is, well, we know it's Jen's settings.
Yeah.
She sees it as like one doc, not pages. Students over 18. So you don't like the word aggrieved, or you don't like what it's saying?
I just feel like aggrieved is very aggressive, like, it's basically saying, no, it is, it's like basically saying that if a parent has an issue with it, which is, you know,
If the definition of aggrieved is feeling resentment at having been fairly treated.
yeah, that's why I feel like
What are we
that's
trying to
kind of
say?
have concerns, like, I feel like it's,
Well, so something happened, right? And then I'm unhappy with that decision, right? That's what this section's about,
Yeah.
for the appeals process, right? You're appealing a decision, but what are they appealing?
like,
Very
I
good.
know, like, if you, I got the letter once for 18, but Maya had a concussion, they forgot to mark those all as excused, right, so I had to call and say.
Well, you probably didn't send in the right note, Jen.
I had to call and say she's not
Students
true.
over 18.
So that would be an instance of that, right?
You were
And
aggrieved.
I was aggrieved, but
So wait,
I just
but-
think.
Because the use of the term aggrieved is to make sure that there's a harm.
A harm,
So in other
okay.
words, if let's say you got that letter and you called the principal and said, hey, this is incorrect, and the principal said, you know what, you're right, let me fix it, it's all fixed, then you wouldn't technically under this be able to go to the school committee and say, this was lousy, it happened to me, because you haven't been aggrieved.
Gotcha.
There was an
Okay.
issue, it was addressed, it was fixed to your satisfaction. And I'm not saying you have to use the term aggrieved, but I think that's the
I think
distinction.
it's the right word.
Is it? Okay.
Whether we can find a synonym for it, but the concept is like feeling like you did not get properly treated in a situation.
Right.
Is that Title 16 still right?
16.
It says further appeals to the school committee decision may be taken through
Yeah,
the
Title
process as
16.
defined in Title 16
Yep.
of the general law of Rhode
Yep.
Island. Okay.
You could be even more specific than that if you wanted to, but
Yeah.
yeah, 1639.
Okay, so we'll remain aggrieved. Under interventions for absences, we're going to, it says students shall only be permitted to make up work and assessments missed during excused absence. This is where we need to update it to tie with the grading policy, right?
Jen, on page 8 up at the top, what does RTI mean?
That all needs to change to
Needs to
MTSS.
change.
RTI is response to intervention. It needs to, earlier
Yeah.
there was a note for MTSS.
Alright, so we're changing all those. I just noted where they were.
Okay.
In the definitions part of this, can we add something, maybe it's somewhere, and I missed it because it's so long, but like something about like what a truancy officer is or what
Mhm.
truancy is? That's not like a normal word that people know, I don't think. Thanks.
Then the other questions that I had were, so we talked about how to address cases where students are unable to go to the doctor. We talked about the fact that it needs to align with the grading policy. I feel like we should add something in here about vacation and what the rules are around vacation. Cause there seems like there are informal correspondences that go out.
Yeah, there was also something, I believe a teacher had brought to her attention about like not putting the burden on the teacher to provide like a week's worth of makeup. Like it was something about like the pre-work, like if you were going on vacation, like what they would give or something. I can't remember when that
Right.
came up in the conversation, but something about that.
And then we should add, I think we mentioned religious observances in here, but we have not touched upon what the documentation would be for that. Like, is that an excused absence if I call and I say they're out because of this religious observation?
Yes,
So that
that was
goes as
listed above.
excused.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was
So
the
sometimes a
definition.
parent can excuse a child.
For religion's observance,
Mhm.
yes.
Okay. And then the other thing, that I'd like to add in here based on, something that was brought up was just ensuring, and I know like it's in the athletic handbook too, but you know, if a child is absent for a religious observance, they should not be barred from participating. And so I think we need to make sure that we're
Yep.
incorporating that here.
And in like the
Handbooks,
athletic,
yeah.
in the handbooks, but also like the
Communication, yeah.
mandatory team meetings and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. And did we talk, and then lastly, just, also something to add, like if like a child is at like a play or like a field trip or something like that, and there is a medical reason that they need to be dismissed early, our current policy doesn't allow for that,
Doesn't allow for them to be dismissed early?
out of a field trip.
Okay. What do you, like, so we're on a field trip, we're not feeling well. We're saying we can't dismiss the student early?
You're on a field trip that's been planned 3 weeks ago. My child had a doctor's appointment that they can't miss that's been scheduled 6 months ago. They can still do both, but I have to come pick the child up from.
Oh, so we're saying right now the language does not allow that? Where does it say that?
It's been put into practice where they were denied because of the
Yes,
fact that it's not
that's
in
true.
policy.
Okay.
So we need to make an allowance for that.
And reason why it was nice, there was concerns about where the child get picked up, how's the child getting picked up, where they are located, like, it was a
It's a complicated
Yeah,
It
it's
was a
not for sure,
logistical
yeah.
situation.
But I would think
And
that
that's why
you could
it
probably
was-
work that out with, yeah.
So we'd like to make sure that a parent doesn't have to jump through those hoops in order
Yeah.
to make that happen.
Give some guidance
Yeah.
for the building
Yeah.
administrators on how to handle a situation like that, maybe. So that the student can still participate in those like extra educational opportunities.
Yeah.
Is there, and maybe I am missing it, like tardy is 1 minute tardy?
Would we, I just wanna go back, what
Yeah.
policy that actually would go in, would that go in this policy? Cause this policy is about absences.
An early dismissal.
The title of the policy should probably change, cause not just, it says, it's attendance in general, actually, so it's all three areas.
Yeah, attendance is okay, cause
Yeah, that's
it's about
fine.
being in,
Yeah, so it's not just absence, it's
Mhm.
attendance, tardy, and early dismissal.
Just
Where
didn't
was
know
your brain going?
Well, I'm just wondering if it should go in our field trip policy.
Oh, that other one,
Yeah, it should go in both.
or reference. In theory, it's an early dismissal.
We just wanna be careful of having to write stuff in multiple policies, cause then when one policy gets changed, the other one doesn't.
That's what I'm saying, I would
Yeah.
not write it in the other one, I would refer, if you need an early dismissal from whatever, refer to blah 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 policy, is what I was saying. Like I wouldn't put it in both. Before we finalize this, Jen, I think it's important that the truancy officer
Yeah.
sees it.
Yeah.
Just to give feedback on anything that maybe is in practice but isn't reflected here. And then obviously, you
What-
know, getting,
What I'd like to do is make the updates from this meeting, get with either Rob or Ken and clarify some things. And then once that's ready, it could go to the truancy officer and then come back to the policy meeting.
I haven't line by line looked at it yet, but are there a lot of different distinctions between the elementary and middle and the high school one?
There were.
I know there's probably a couple
There
things
were a
and like with the
few,
age
but
stuff, but like, is it
nothing-
possible that we could condense it and then for like the differences, outline those? I just think it's silly to have identical language for elementary and middle and high school. Like when it's different, like I'm not saying get
Right.
rid of it, but I'm saying maybe have it say like this and then like at the high school, this is also comes into play. You know, I just think it's a very long document that is probably unnecessary unless there's like
Yep.
massive differences. So my recommendation would be to consolidate,
Okay.
if possible.
Okay.
Not deleting anything,
Right,
but like,
just moving and making it.
yeah, it just makes
yeah.
it like cleaner. And it also doesn't make people think in their head like, oh, now that I'm in high school, I have a different like whatever, like, no, like, it's pretty much the same with the exceptions of X and Y
Yep.
or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I can look at that and do that.
Thanks.
Okay, anything else on this one?
I had that question about the tardy thing.
That's a court thing too, that comes up quite often.
Yeah.
Again,
So are all the different times outlined for all the different school starts that we have? Cause there's a time for the high school that says prior to 7:45, but like all the schools are
No, it doesn't say
different.
that for the other for the
Yeah.
elementary or the middle, that's the only one.
Yeah, so I feel like if we're gonna say
yeah,
whatever, we need to
usually they
outline
don't
it.
include the time because
Yeah,
usually
should
that's
I
more of an
roll this one?
administrative decision if they wanna switch a
Yeah.
start time, and you wouldn't want to have to go back and amend the policy.
Well, and we have, the elementary schools have 2 different start times.
Yeah, say the bell
middle
time,
school,
that
yeah.
particular school's bell time or bell
Yeah,
period,
so I
whatever it
would
is.
just specify that part, it's under,
Okay.
it's on page 7 on the top.
Yeah, and also like if you're a senior and you have off roll 7:45, you're not coming in, but you're still could be tardy if you're from your first period, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I think we should fix
Yeah.
that. Again, it's probably something that we're not doing in practice,
But in
but
policy,
it's
yeah.
technically, if it's 7:45, it's 7:45 in the policy kind of vibe.
okay. Anything else on this one? Okay. So we're not gonna get through another one in the time that we have left, but if we wanna talk about a path forward.
Can we, forgive me if I missed something, but as far as this policy attendance moving forward, what do we want the next steps to be?
We're gonna go through, like, fix what we talked about, give it to you two to look at, to like, kind of
Get admin feedback.
get an admin
and
feedback, put
it's
some
gonna come back
verbiage
to
in
policy
about the
one more time.
philosophy, and then it'll come back to policy.
Have the truancy
Yeah, have the
officer
truancy
look at
officer.
it to see if there's anything that needs to be updated from their perspective.
Okay,
So, one more look.
Is that okay?
that's fine,
Okay.
yep, just wanna make sure we're,
I feel like we're close, but like I don't wanna,
so.
it might also be helpful to make like publicized to, now that school's going back into session, like, this is one that I feel like getting parent and guardian feedback on would be, like, you know, that's a good, like,
Mhm.
community opportunity, and I know obviously they could come here,
Yeah.
but if some other districts like kinda highlight that, so we can think about that
Yeah.
piece.
Do you want to do that before we bring it back to policy, or do you want, okay, so just next steps will be edits and then bring to the admin team, truancy officer, and then we'll bring it
Yep.
back to policy from there.
Yeah, hopefully last time, it would come to policy with like suggestions and edits from those folks, and then we would adopt those, and then it would go to the school committee. Like, I think that's probably where we're at.
Okay.
Jen agrees.
Mm-hmm. So, we have a plan for the energy management. I'm gonna touch on the FERPA, if that's okay. We need a FERPA policy, we don't have one.
So we're working on that.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
did
no,
that,
yeah.
I CC'd Ken, but Rachel found that out,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I sent him the
Yep, and
letter,
I-
because there's a form letter, which I'm not sure why we don't have, and that should be in our handbook, which I sent to you.
Yep, and I sent it back to you this afternoon, and there's also, we need some directory language pieces in there. The one good thing about that is, I think I said to you,
Yeah.
Jen, is that there are model forms
Yeah.
that Ken had
Mhm.
sent.
Yeah.
So we don't have to reinvent the wheel on
Yeah.
that, but we should definitely get the annual notices fixed and then a policy that
Yeah.
explains it.
So,
So was there something you sent to me regarding?
like a
the
draft?
I
model?
sent
there
you
is go in the FERPA.
yeah, I sent
folder.
you a
Okay.
response back on the model form you sent me,
Okay.
and then I sent you the US government's the form on directory information.
Okay.
Same thing.
Cause if we can get that, cause to me, like, that's model language, we shouldn't have to go through policy for that.
Well, those notices,
I'd like to-
that's a federal
That's
requirement.
right,
I
They
would
go
like
home,
to
so
get,
yes.
well, I would like to
Agreed.
get those in the student
Agreed,
handbooks before we
agreed,
send it
yeah.
out,
Yep,
so.
agreed.
Yeah, so we need a policy, we need a handbook thing, and we need an annual notification, which can be the Aspen.
Right, but we could get the
Right, but what I'm
policy,
saying
handbook
is,
and the.
what we need to send out to families regarding the notice doesn't need to go through the policy committee, so I can work on that with Andrew, so it's, cause they're federal notices, and there's model notices, so we just need to take that, and I like to get that in the handbook before this.
Right, we can do that, but I do think we need to address the policy, because there is some, there is
Yes,
some
no,
flexibility
He's
in as to
saying
what
Ken
you
wants to
want.
move faster than
Yeah,
the
oh,
policy.
no, I agree,
What
I'm,
I'm saying
and
is
I'm
the
100%
notice,
in
the
Ken's corner.
notices that
Yep.
need to go out
Yeah.
do not need to go through policy committee to go out.
Not to get them out now,
Right.
but when we go back and review the policy, there is some flexibility as far as what we wanna define as directory notice, so that may change things
Yep.
in the future, but to your, I agree with you completely, Ken.
Okay, so we're gonna, you'll take care of those administrative two things, and
Yes.
we'll regroup on the policy and any
Mhm.
potential changes to the annual notice based on the policy review. Yes, okay.
So as far as people on this committee, we should read the redlined FERPA policy and put notes in before the next meeting.
Yes. And the FERPA directory one also.
They're separate?
Yes,
Do they have to be?
yes.
You know how much
Yeah,
that
because
thrills
Yeah.
me.
there's notice, the FERPA, the directory, and the other, our annual notices that are required to go home and be signed, cause parents have to opt in,
Yeah.
opt out.
Yeah,
They don't
yeah.
want their child, but then we should have a policy that outlines all of that.
Yeah, but I'm saying, do you need two policies or can it be one policy?
No, you can have one policy
Yeah.
that covers, because they're all contained
Yeah, I
in
would
the
do
FERPA.
I would have them together if that's allowed.
Okay, I can do that.
As long as it addresses all
Yep,
the
I'm
things
sorry, I
that'll be
understood.
I just don't want two different FERPA thingies in the world, if that's not, unless it's required.
You can look at South Kingston. They just did a really comprehensive review of theirs, but I will tell you theirs is they opted to go with an opt-in as opposed to an opt-out. So basically parents had to opt in if they wanted that information released, and it didn't really work particularly well.
That's really hard.
It becomes onerous, doesn't work out that well, but just as, if you wanna take a look at it, that they did a lot of work on theirs for.
Okay.
They may have even changed it since, to tell you the truth. They may have revised it.
So that's that. The physical restraints we still need to review in here. Attendance boundaries, assignment of students, redistricting,
Isn't the physical restraint one like a very time sensitive one because of the thing?
I mean, we're working on it,
Yeah.
and I think it's been put into practice, most
Yeah,
of the,
and
Is there-
Rachel's
I
doing
just
training.
wasn't in that
What's
last
wrong?
one, and my concern with it is the using physical restraint and crisis intervention as simultaneous words.
Did you
It
explain?
really should just be physical restraint. We want them to intervene crisis, but we don't want them to get to the point of using
Right, and I
physical
think that was.
So we had talked
And I
about,
fixed some of it, but not all of it's fixed. I looked at it again this weekend.
right, we had talked about the
There's some
difference
other
between
legal
physical
things.
restraint and crisis management, like there's times you need to manage a situation, right? So we put in crisis management, which would be like de-escalation, those types of
Wasn't it the regulations?
Yeah, we
techniques.
did not change it
So
because
what
of the
happened with that,
regulation,
Rachel, is
yeah.
you're right, and I think we all agreed that the terms should be
We did.
distinguished, and then we went and looked at the regulations,
And
and the
it's not.
regulations use the terms interchange, all that language that's in our policy is pulled right from the regs.
Yeah, it should
So,
be
we-
that way, though. It's so
and I think
bizarre.
Ken explained
We
what
can't
your
change it.
concern was, and I think it
Concern
made
is-
I'm
sense to
very
everybody.
concerned about that.
Concern is
because-
changing
We could
this.
advocate to the people
Yeah,
that wrote it,
well-
but
The concern is that you
That's
can't
not,
change the
that's
wording of the
petitioners writing a
regulations and-
regulation.
No,
Not
this,
petitioners
Right,
writing.
Yeah.
we pulled it right from the actual regs that
Okay.
were in our policy though, but I think
Yeah.
your
You're not
interpretation.
wrong.
It's just
But-
me when I kept reading it, I was
Yeah.
like, this makes no sense.
Well,
to me.
and that's why we
It
pulled,
should be by
I think
crisis.
Jen and I were going through the thing, like, I think this is right
that
in the
makes
regs,
sense
and it
then.
was.
That's why it was
Didn't
everywhere.
we make changes though when we were, I thought when we
There
were
was
We
more
made
here,
changes,
questions,
we
yeah.
made changes where we could,
Yep.
Yeah.
but anything that wasn't changed was because of the way.
because of the way they wrote it.
Yeah, we just elected to go
So the
with the regs as
philosophy,
written.
right, we worked on the philosophy.
Yeah, I saw those
Uh,
changes. Jen, I found another question this weekend, I'll have to go back and look, hold on. I have to pull that one up.
Was it the mechanical restraint one?
Yeah, we don't do those at all in
Okay.
schools.
So,
Didn't we, wasn't
Yeah,
there-
that was that one. And I think it seemed like it went against another thing, either in the beginning or the further on, where it says that we don't do those,
don't
but
do
then,
those, yeah.
and then it was there,
Yeah.
so I thought that was a little odd, cause I was looking at it to create the presentation for, orientation day.
The other thing that's still needed with this is the review of the JER, or the JICR, and if there's anything from that needs to come into this policy.
Also on the procedures for investigating complaints,
I
just,
added that
okay, I was
one,
gonna say,
yeah.
but I
Yeah,
pulled
that's-
that out,
yeah.
I know Ken and Rachel needed to look at that and see if it was even feasible or, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, so if I put in what you gave me, Andrew, so
Okay.
if that needs to change, we'll need to change that.
And then I did have a question. So Kenny asked me about developing a procedure for this. But the issue with that, the procedure is the entire training. So that I got a little like, I'm not sure how I write a procedure where we're following a training.
I'm not as concerned with the procedure, cause that's an administrative thing, it's more the policy and just making sure the policy
Okay.
reflects.
So I think the biggest question, Rach, so.
It's under one, procedures. The North Kingston School Department Administration shall forthwith develop written procedures.
These are those, this is that,
Oh,
we
okay.
went through that, yeah,
Oh, okay,
yeah.
that
Yeah.
makes more sense
Yeah.
to me.
I think
get
the
it
the
now.
question mark was, the way that our policies used to be is there'd be the policy and then there'd be the R one. But so what Jen was saying is, in the R one, is there anything that needs to be pulled up to the other policy? Because the idea would be to sunset the R one,
R1's
and so like that's where she needs feedback, is like having you all look at that and say, oh, actually that should be in the policy, or like
So-
that should be in the
right,
policy.
so I mean, look at what we have here, Rachel, in the current physical restraint red line.
Okay, make
Is
sure
it-
I'm looking at the right one. GIC physical restraint 2, red line 43024.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we wanna add under procedures?
I am specifically asking though that somebody go look at JICR
Mhm.
and read that, and, cause that's gonna go away when we pass this, so if there's
Oh, I
something
see.
in that
Yeah.
policy
I get it.
that we want to keep.
It's not like a this second thing, like
Yeah.
I would go look at it just in
Yeah.
case.
I'm gonna have to go
Yeah.
back and look at that. I understand now. Thanks.
Okay, so.
A lot of it's, I bet it'll be very little, but we wouldn't wanna unintentionally remove something.
Right, and there might be stuff in there, Rachel, that's procedure wise, that doesn't need to be
Yeah.
in the policy.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, so that's that. Assignment of students to school, establishing attendance boundaries, those all still need to be addressed, as do the bus. Is there anything, I know we're butting up against time because we've got the school committee meeting, is there anything in these bus policies that needs to be put forward for the beginning of school?
I gotta go open it and go through, cause I know there were a few things
Cause I do think
Add
we could
in
do a two-phase on this
Yep.
one, which is
Oh,
like, if we have a couple things we'd like to put in right now, bring it up to the school committee, and then it comes, we could approve it.
Yeah.
If they're amenable to that, and then it could come right back for further
Yep.
look at, but if there are some things that we wanna do, I would recommend that approach, just like we've done with some other ones.
Yeah, like I have some little things, but I think there definitely needs to be something in here that addresses, I know the transportation department is working on it, but there should be something in here that addresses, bus checks.
Where are they? Because
I can't find them either.
They are under bus related.
Under what fold? Oh, no, never
Policies
see
and
it.
process,
No, I
bus
found it.
related.
I was looking for transportation.
I guess that would have made more sense, but
It's okay.
I will change the name of it right now.
bus related.
So Ken, while you look at that, I'm just gonna keep talking for a minute. The
Mhm.
privacy policy, falls under, I think that went with the
Is that one
bus.
connected with FERPA?
That,
Or
yes, that
connected-
one's connected with FERPA, thank you. The anti-harassment and the ACD, those just need to start being melded, so if nobody has any suggestions, I'll just start melding those and bring back a draft of those.
Yes,
And then
the HIV.
the HIV, I got with, Colleen, she gave me, her input. That one is ready to go with.
Is that one worth a quick glance to see if we can move it forward in 5 minutes?
Yep. So if you
Stop
go
looking at that.
to,
Which one?
Go to HIV
Go to
instead.
HIV.
I was looking, she
I
asked me
know,
what
I
the
know, but
transportation was, so.
But that one I bet, because
It's
Colleen
really
gave the
quick.
feedback, we might be able to move forward and then just have that one locked before school starts. Cause that's a mandated one, right?
my guess is Ken's not gonna go quickly through
Oh, here's
this.
the red line. Okay.
What's it called? Is it the red line J?
Red line JLCCA.
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah,
Never mind,
it's
that's
not gonna be fast.
Nope,
And
I
then
thought
the-
it was like one
No,
quick
no,
tweak.
no. And then the only other one that still needs to be addressed is the dress code. And that's it. So we'll just keep these on the agenda for the next meeting. anything on the bus that needs to?
I'm going back to that one.
Yeah, sorry. I thought it was like one sentence in the other one. It was not.
Like I see that you added bus contractors and drivers required to participate in annual training under bus contractor.
Is that something we have to consult the union contract on? Like, what's the order of operations when you do something like that with the policy and the contract, Mr. Hennessy?
Well, if there should be language in the contract that says it can't supersede or contradict a policy, but if we change a policy that has an implication, we have to impact bargain with the union over
Yep,
what the
so we would
impact
change the
might
policy first and then we would go bargain. Okay.
I mean, I would put the bus contract one forward because it talks about the mandatory training, and that's what we're wanting to put in place. I know that's what Michelle's plan is, and she's
Okay.
starting that. So that one would go forward. Student conduct on buses. So that's the one I went through.
What were you gonna say?
Nothing, I'll wait.
That one as well has changes in it.
Which one?
The student conduct on buses.
That's the one that
To bring
changes it
forward.
all to the transportation supervisor?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I don't see that anything was added to student transportation.
At the bottom, you have, does this apply for athletic and other extracurricular bus? Transportation's transportation, no matter what bus, what, I mean, it would apply for.
Wasn't that the one you wanted to change the radical mile on?
The what?
The radical.
That's a different policy.
No,
No,
that's this one.
student transportation is that one, which one?
Oh,
are
I'm
you
on
looking
student conduct of buses, I was still
Gotcha.
talking about that.
at? Oh, okay.
I don't think my brain's moving as fast as all you're moving right
Not
now.
usually.
No.
Okay, not
Um,
Jen's at least.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
that it does apply, but the policy doesn't specifically say that, Ken, so we should, because the policy says school activities during the school day. And so that's not
Mhm.
extracurricular or athletic bus conduct, so that should be fixed, but we can fix that on the,
Alright, so I'll make a motion to move forward, the policy that refers to the training.
okay. I'll second that.
Ken, you good with that for
Mhm.
purposes of?
Well, if the bus conduct's just rewording the philosophy to add that in, we could do that too. For bus conduct, 'cause all we
I think that can
say
wait
is
and see if
just-
we wanna, cause before, like, do a full look at it. Unless you want, because that, I'm just thinking of things that will like be very impactful for like this school year. I have a motion and a second on mine now.
Which one are we which one did we just do that for?
So it was for,
It was for the bus contractor selection.
Bus contractor
EEA.
selection, okay.
So we've got a first and a second, so I'm gonna call the vote on that one to move that
hold
one
on, make sure
forward.
Rob's like, know what he's voting on. So it's language that Ken had presented basically,
Okay.
about annual training.
Okay, okay. Yeah, this is,
Yeah.
just wanna make sure I,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay.
Alright, Nick.
Okay, I'm gonna call the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Alright, let's pick our date for our next meeting. It would be
We did make a change to the student conduct buses to include what we were talking about,
the,
so.
okay,
Can we, I'm happy to pick a date, the next date, but can we go back to a, like, pattern, and also a pattern that makes sense with school committee meetings? So like, if
Mhm.
we know the school committee meetings are on, like, the every other Tuesday, like, having this maybe be the week prior, and, you know, like, so
Yeah.
like, it makes sense when we're like moving things.
I actually would like to do that with all our meetings, cause I think
Yeah.
it gets to the point where, I know the two of you are on many committees,
No,
we
yeah,
are,
like, that's what, like,
we
trying
need
to make those
we
more
actually need to
consistent, yeah.
coordinate you know, we got the school committee meeting set, we need to coordinate, I know, what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
this, along
Yeah.
with the others, we need to coordinate all of that, so I mean, we can't do that right now, but we do need to look at everything.
So why
make sure
don't we meet next on the 16th? Well, we could go one of two ways. I'm gonna suggest we can meet on, the next school committee meeting is the 12th.
Yeah,
So if we wanna try to get a meeting in before that school committee meeting.
it's not gonna happen.
Okay, then let's make it the 16th.
Just for like,
Yeah,
with
no,
the
I'm
beginning of school and
just-
stuff,
yeah.
I think that your other date's more realistic,
Yeah.
and then that would prepare us for the next
Yeah.
one, yeah.
And that'll put us on the every other with the school committee.
So the 16th?
The 16th at 4:30, does that work?
Mondays, do you know the Monday schedule yet? Yeah, just put it on and we'll.
Put it in, yep.
Yeah, I don't have mine rolling yet either.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion
It's not a good
to
night, so.
adjourn.
And you, so moved, or second.
Okay, all in favor?
Yeah.